Hello and welcome to Radio Waves. I'm your host, Kris Poliquin, and this is a production of Red Apples Media. We're broadcasting out of WLBE, my 790 AM out of Leesburg, Florida. And if you're watching us on Lake Sumter Television, you're doing so on Comcast Channel 13, Bright House 498, and CenturyLink Prism Channel 83. So today I have a special guest that I'm actually very excited to talk with, Mr. Bill Mathias, who is the school board chairperson for District 1 in Lake County. And today I would like to get into what got you into this line of community service, because it's not your line of work, and then kind of talk about some of the challenges and the great strides that the county has so far, as well as for you personally, because you were just recently awarded something I think is pretty spectacular. So, Bill, thanks for coming onto the show.
You bet. And actually, I represent District 1. I was chair 2 years ago. Stephanie Luke is our chair now.
Okay, well, There we go.
Yeah.
Ms. Lucas, I apologize.
That's right. So she's probably listening. So,
okay.
Yeah. So some 35 years ago, I came to Lake County and started my company, Mathias Food Service. And at that time, had a foster child. And that foster child had learning disabilities, and I was able to shake hands for the first time with a fellow by the name of Ken Bragg. And Ken was really the godfather of vocational education, and he was starting a VOTEC center in Eustis, Florida, which is now called Lake Tech.
Of course.
For the next 11 years, I would serve as on the board for the commercial foods program, and 9 of those years I chaired the advisory committee for Lake Tech. So I have a bit of a history from the first time I came here, getting involved in public education. And Don, my foster child, ended up graduating from their program, Culinary Foods. And so he had the skill sets to go on and provide for a family in the future. From there, my young son, he went to St. Paul's Catholic School in Leesburg, and I served 9 years on that board. I always say I got held back 1 year because the school only goes K to 8, right. And I served 1 more year after he left. And I come from a line of those that are in my family that are concerned about education. My dad was on the school board in Duval County, and my mom at 88 retired from Duval County, and she started a program called Prevention of Blindness that she touts to this day. Some 9,600 kids who didn't know they couldn't see now were able to get glasses. And so I'm very proud of both my mom and my dad in their service to public education. So then where does that bring me? So at years go past, I'm going to move my company from a company I owned from Orlando to Leesburg. I have the building, I own it. I'm leasing right now in in Orlando. And 3 of my top executives would not come because of our schools. And you see, that's where you have to understand it isn't the executive or the person making the decision to move. It comes down to the family. And the first thing they're going to check is our schools.
Of course.
So I started looking at Lake County schools, and at that time, they were some $438 million in debt. And
now, when was this?
Strangling. This is in 2012. Actually, 2011, as I looked at it for 2012.
Okay.
Yeah. $32 million a year to service that debt. To this day, $32 million right off the top. And then you look at Lake County schools, and at that time they were 65th out of 67 counties in funding, and yet 19th in student population. So it really sets up the scenario for the perfect storm.
Yeah.
So I decided that at that point maybe I could bring some business perspectives to the school district, and maybe the fact that I had served in those other roles, that I could be an asset. And so I ran and I was elected. It was to fill a 2-year seat initially. And after into my second year, I wasn't quite sure that I was a fit. But the superintendent, Dr. Moxley at the time, she brought this initiative called Engage LCS. And our budget back then was around $534 million. And it really was looking differently that a school district is a business. And what is your main purpose? It's to service our kids. And
right.
So suddenly I was excited again because everything was subject to review. If it didn't touch our children, that we would redeploy the same tax dollars back into the classroom. The board at that time committed to $10 million a year over 3 years, and we met that. So $30 million was redeployed back to our students, and to the benefit of the district. The district. At the same time, I was able to use my business connections, and with that means that across government lines, the county commission, our state representatives, and really carry the flag of how important economic development is to Lake County, and it all starts with our schools and that education. That's the message that I was able to successfully bring forward. And you saw that as part of election campaigns of commissioners and representatives and senators. And so that has been a positive influence, I think, with my service on the board. And most important, I want to say that I almost missed is I did my victory lap the first time around. I came back to Dr. Moxley and I said, you don't have a problem with your schools, you have a PR problem. Because we have extremely dedicated teachers and administrators. We are doing great things, but it is our message getting out. And so today we have Sherry Owens, our public information officer, who's proactive and and exciting things that have happened is Dr. Moxley retired, and we now have Superintendent Cornegie, who at a workshop where the legislature had just passed this Senate Bill 7169, which really attacks funding. And again, we're going to speak about that some more.
Yeah.
that Superintendent Cornegie and is pro charter schools, this bill, and pulls away millage dollars or maintenance dollars from us. That Superintendent Cornegie sat there before the board at a workshop and said, with all that in mind, that we are going to still be better than those schools, and we are going to be the destination district. And that inspires, it inspired me particularly, and I know that message has carried into the business community, to our teachers, and ultimately it's going to benefit our kids.
The first thing I did whenever I moved was what house are we going to buy, and where is the better schools?
Bingo.
And with the population growth that Lake County has seen over the last couple of years, it seems to me like we need not only more schools, but, well, with more schools, more teachers, more counselors, more leadership, so on and so forth. So I get it.
Right.
Get that PR machine going, and I think you have.
Yeah, we have.
Really
And it was an opportunity. It is amusing, actually it's aggravating to me that sometimes you'll hear about things today that happened 6 years ago and were corrected. And you're going, seriously? Like you're not staying on board? And you'll get into topics of Common Core, which we have no control over. The legislature sets the curriculum.
Right.
However, the Stop Common Core, the truth is that Governor Scott actually ended Common Core in 2014, and yet 3 years later we're still speaking about it. That people will complain about the FCAT test that ended, not the FCAT. The FCAT was replaced with the Florida standards.
Right.
And that again, the governor pulled funding from Common Core, and we wrote basically our own standards. That doesn't mean you threw away the baby with the bathwater. They took that and they had hearings, and so we have embraced our own standards. Is there still work to be done? Yes. And the delivery of that curriculum and the legislature working with school districts and listening to superintendents and parents, that we're on the right trajectory for our kids.
Okay. Now, Lake County over the last year, I'd say, has had some significant acknowledgments, I would say.
Right.
We've had many award winners, you being one. And I don't want to put you on the spot, but I think it's important for me to allow our listeners to know what your achievement on the school board is, because I think it gives a little bit of credit on just where we're going as a district.
Yeah.
And again, trying to segue from a lot of awards, Teacher of the Years, things of that nature,
Right.
to focus on you, because you're doing this because you want to, not because you have to. You're not doing it for the paycheck. You're doing it because this is important to you. And I want to build faith with our audience again that we've got good people in the leadership in Lake County.
Yeah. Well, we had, in addition to the 2017 Teacher of the Year, we also had Tammy Jenkins. We also had a finalist for Principal of the Year and Vice Principal of the Year.
Yeah.
So those are amazing accomplishments in themselves. That I happen to have been fortunate and blessed that I was nominated and was selected as the School Board Member of the Year for the state of Florida for 2017. And
again, that's for the state of Florida.
Yes.
To me, that's a big deal.
It very
Congratulations,
humbling. Well,
by the way.
Thanks. It's very humbling, and I think the most humbling part is it's not something you do in a silo, where it is a collaborative board that through the accreditation process recently, that the very first statement out of the accreditation team was how well our board functions. So there's 5 members of the board that all have the move in the right, again, direction for our kids, and I'm just part of that. I think that I have been, as I spoke about earlier, it is something I'm very passionate about, that years ago, my dad and I would speak about before I ran, and he said, is it a paying job? And I remember reflecting on that, and it does. And he says, well, I can't believe that citizen service, he doesn't believe that citizen service should be paid. And so in honor of my dad, who didn't live to see me elected, but I donate every dime back
Wow.
to charities, yeah. And so I believe that it does a couple of things for me. One is it gives me an opportunity to honor my father. That's number one.
Sure.
Number two is I'm able to touch groups that help our kids, and that's really my focus, is those charities that touch our children. And that I'm blessed because of my business that I can afford to do that. So I strongly believe that it's a borrowed seat, and that when my time is done, or I'm not passionate, or I don't have something that I can contribute, that it's time for me to hand it over to someone else. So, which will get me on one little other tangent, which is that with a hat in hand, which was how our government, I don't think that the forefathers ever thought that one would be a professional politician. Andrew Jackson spoke about taking your hat and go back to your farm.
Right.
That in today's world, that believe it or not, that if you're on the school board for 6 years, you're eligible for retirement. Elected officials, those that you would expect to citizen serve,
Sure.
costs the state of Florida about $30 million in retirement.
Wow.
So
after
yeah.
6 years.
6 years, you're eligible for retirement on the school board. Yeah, crazy, right?
I wasn't aware.
It just isn't.
But it's that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and if you look at how it progresses, and that those that have chosen politics as more than just citizen service, that it really is sort of a livelihood, that it is a progressive thing, so that you move from a city commissioner, let's say, to a county position, to county commission, to the House, and you're accumulating that time.
Right.
And so, again, I think that we hear a lot of conversation about term limits, and I think that we'd be better off if we were speaking about ending benefits, because I think many stay longer than they should for the ultimate reward of the retirement.
Wow, that's pretty. I
really off
wasn't
subject,
aware.
but-
Oh no! Hey, this is a show about educating the audience on things that they may or may not know.
Right.
And I didn't myself. I myself did not realize that.
Yeah.
So I may consider a career change.
Yeah. Well, I was trying to get a constitutional amendment, and so I attempted to get it at the House level, someone to sponsor it as a constitutional amendment to end benefits, and that didn't sort out. So then I called a friend of mine who put me in touch with John Morgan, because he got the medical marijuana, and he goes, yeah, it's going to cost you about $2 a ballot. Well, you need 900,000 in order to get it on the ballot, and I'm passionate, but not quite that passionate.
Right. Well, Bill, we need to take a quick break. When we return, we're going to start talking a little bit about some of the challenges our county faces.
Well done.
All right. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back to Radio Waves. Again, I'm your host, Kris Poliquin. And before the break, we were speaking with Mr. Bill Mathias, a school board member for Lake County Schools, about some of the, I guess, strides that the county has seen and a little bit of history about yourself. And I think it goes to demonstrate the level of leadership and educators that we have within our county. Now, I want to ask one last question about this award that you just recently received. There was a bit of play to when you actually received that award, right? They didn't just go, "Hey, Bill, come on down. We have an award for you." They almost got you all boiled up, if I'm not mistaken.
I was pretty motivated, and the superintendent was part of the ruse, as was Carmen Cullen and Jim Hamilton, who I mentioned earlier, that through his advocacy and our discussion of the DCD, that at the superintendent's convention and school board convention in Tampa, he was going to be there. And the superintendent sent me a text and said he'd like to meet with you because he has found some flaws in my formula here. And so that got me motivated, and I think she knew it would. And so we organized that I would meet with him when in an off session from their meetings. And so I drove down. And when I got down there, the superintendent met me at the door and took me in. She goes, "We're going to have lunch first." And Jim's sitting next to me. And we exchanged pleasantries. And then they said they were going to begin to give awards. And I said to the superintendent, "Is it okay if we excuse ourselves?" Because I had actually another meeting I had to go to afterwards.
Oh.
Yeah. I've got a restaurant going in Tampa, Rocco's Tacos, that I wanted to go by and check how it was progressing. And so as it so happened, the School Board Member of the Year was the last award. And as I was getting up, I looked over to Jim, who was laughing. I said, "We still are going to talk about the FEFP, right?"
Right.
and we did. So at the end of that presentation, some picture ops and that kind of thing, that the superintendent, Jim, Christy Burns, school board member, and we did a session, and it wasn't. He felt like that genuinely looking at the DCD, that it's going to come with such obstacles because of the 14 largest counties control it. They're the only ones that benefit, but they also control the legislature. And where he really felt that our direction should be was looking at the foundation of the FEFP and the Florida statute that is called Florida Education Quality Assurance.
Okay. And now, Bill, let me ask you just to be clear. So the district cost differential, the DCD that you're speaking of, and the FEFP, why is that important? And if you can explain to our audience.
Yeah, okay.
Because I know it's very elaborate, but what are we talking about here?
Here's what basically, and this is a formula that is reviewed by the University of Florida, and it looks at what does it cost to live in our counties across Florida. And for every dollar that we send to Tallahassee, for an example, they send us back 97 cents. Because they feel like it is less expensive to live here. And it looks at some things like employment, home prices, industry, that kind of thing. Well, it's a little bit of a double whammy is the way I always looked at it, because another part of the formula has to do with local effort. That's how much taxes are paid. And if they're looking at lower wages, because it costs less to live here, and lower house prices, that's lower tax base, you see.
Right.
Which is what the local effort is about. And so that was where I zeroed in initially, is that that's not equitable. And it cost Lake County $4.4 million last year. So every year, that's what.
And we're talking funding or schools.
That's just basic. That is saying, here is the basic funding. Well, we're not going to give you that. We're going to give you 97% of it. That's what that says. So, but park that. The real difference is, or the real other issue happens to be, they have different indexes that support districts differently and fund differently. Each of these little boxes is a funding source. And they have what's called a sparsity index. And that is for districts that have less than 4 or 5 schools, because they say the cost of operation is going to be X, and regardless of how many kids you have. And so we're going to give you extra funding for that. Okay. What they don't say is that, look at our district, which is 19th in student population.
For the state.
For the state. And yet we have all of these expenses, but we don't have the local effort. We're getting less than our dollar for dollar back. And so the approach that Jim is taking is saying, let's look at the statute 1011.62 for anybody that wants to. And the intent of that, which is law, is to provide quality education for all districts. And so if you took the average, and he said, which for me, the DCD was a starting point. Really, it was to get over here where we're at $6,800 per child in funding.
Okay.
And we have some counties in Florida that are as high as $9,000. So that kind of spread. And so if you averaged out all of the counties, which I've done, that it's about $7,200. We're getting 68, keep that in mind.
Okay.
And so I'm saying just be fair. Just bring us to the average. And what does that mean to Lake County? $15 million a year. That's what it means. And that then puts us competitive, I think. And it makes that mom at home go, yeah, they are offering what my kid needs.
Right.
They can afford to.
If Lake County is ranked 62nd, right? Pretty low considering the size.
Out of 67 counties, right.
Of 67 counties.
Yeah.
I don't want to say that we're a loser in this, but we're not a clear winner. Who are the winners? So when Florida's divvying up, is the money going to less fortunate areas that need it? Or is it really just based off the cost of living? Because that seems kind of skewed to me.
No, well, it looks at, again, all of these columns look at needs.
Sure.
And funding sources. That if you started at the base funding, which everybody starts at, then of course that's equitable. And so this part of the column right here is fair. It's after that it moves on. And again, the biggest factor is our property values and what's called our local effort. And that is that our tax base is just so low. Our retirement communities, they support education, certainly. But they also bring with them the need for services. And, so those service workers, about 50% of our population, our working population, is service driven. And those aren't the wages that will generate, again, the $1 million homes or the $300,000 homes, or you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
And we have we're working hard at it, our economic development, our county commission, to bring businesses here, but it's the chicken or the egg. They want a workforce ready. And that's where, again, if you look at the positive things that have happened in the district, that the superintendent now has someone that's over our career and technical, recognizing that not everyone is going to go to college, a real emphasis on that.
Right.
Looking at the strengths of providing more vocational programs in our high schools. And so we've got some good things going on that are going to bring industry here. And people will be proud to move here.
Okay. Well, can you talk about some of those things?
Yeah.
What can the residents of Lake County look forward to?
Yeah. I think the residents of Lake County can look forward to, last year under Dr. Moxley, she set really the framework for success for Superintendent Cornegie, in that we went from a C district to a B district. And,
right.
and that the superintendent is not going to be satisfied until we're an A district. That the Superintendent Cornegie is reinforcing recognizing that the differences in kids, that differential learning, but also really a real strength, and that each child needs to learn how to basically read and write. And
no, that's shocking.
Yeah. So we were on a little bit of a different trajectory, and certainly as technology becomes more and more invasive into our lifestyles, that we were in the direction in my head was that we were going to move away from the written and more into the computer age, and that would
sure.
And so the superintendent feels differently about that. She believes that the core value should be reading, writing, and math, and you should be able to do it with a pen and a piece of paper. And so I thought about it, and I have two sons. I have a 32-year-old and I have a 22-year-old. My 32-year-old is completely computer savvy. He does everything on the machine, locks his house, turns on his lights,
sure.
Talks to the machine. And my other son, 22, reads a book. He enjoys cuddling up to a book. And so when my son was in school, they didn't have computers, my 32-year-old.
Right.
And yet that is his lifestyle. So if he learned the core values just like my young son, which is writing and arithmetic and reading without the benefit of the machine.
Well, if you learn the basics, you can learn the machine.
That's right.
You learn the machine. It's hard to go back and do things on paper.
Bingo. And that's
So
where I backed
it's-
up and I thought, the superintendent's spot on about this.
Yeah.
And we have invested, since I came on the board, we also recognized that we needed to set that foundation, that preschool to third grade is building the foundation for success. And so the boards back then moved extra dollars to reinforcing that educational process and curriculum for those young people. And we're seeing the benefit today.
Okay. Bill, there's so much information out there. If someone wanted to start getting more involved or just delving into the deeper weeds of some of the things we talked about today, where can they get this information?
Well, actually, if anyone wants to really be bored by it, I'd love to talk to them about it. And they can reach me at Mathias B at lake.k12.fl.us. That's my email. Or 352-326-3434, extension 28. If they want to go online, we have a brand new website. We have a brand new logo. There's a lot of very fresh things in Lake County Schools that I'd encourage them anyway. About a month ago, I went on the website, and I didn't realize that we'd implemented the changes, and it is impressive. I mean, it really is. So all of that information is there. Or you can attend a workshop or a school board meeting if you we always enjoy the public there and enjoy hearing from them.
Yeah, get involved, folks.
That's right.
That's the key. This is our community.
The future's our kids, and that for those that really want to make a difference, that investment of time and money, and it will pay dividends.
All right. Well, Bill, that's all the time we have for today. I want to thank you again very much for coming on to our show.
I'm grateful for you having me. Thanks.
All right. That's it for our show today. Again, I'm your host, Kris Poliquin. This has been a production of Red Apples Media. We will see you next time.